The time is just gone, 17 minutes past 9 a.m. We continue this morning, and we are going to be joined shortly by former Minister Ronnie Kasrils. And this comes against the background of the Chief Rabbi of the Union of Orthodox Synagogues of South Africa. We're talking about Chief Rabbi Warren Goldstein. And he obviously has asked leaders, Muslim leaders in particular, to ensure tolerance with regards to the opposing views on Palestine and Israel. And Ronnie Kasrils has written an open letter to the president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, describing the chief rabbi, who is a disgrace to his faith and to human decency. Mr. Kasrils, good morning to you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Salam to all, salam alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Alaikum to all at Salam Media. Sorry. Good to be with you on this freezing cold Johannesburg day.
Well, it is freezing close, but
incidentally, our dear host, Inayat, the heading that you refer to about him being a disgrace to his religion, etc., that's the Sunday Times headline to my letter. My letter's actually an open letter to President Cyril Ramaphosa. I don't use those specific words within the letter, although, as you well know, my letter is a very strong condemnation of the position of Chief Rabbi Warren Goldstein.
Yes. In fact, thank you very much for clarifying that issue and the heading of the letter as well. Now, let's talk about the chief rabbi. And obviously, this is of major concern to you, Mr. Kasrils, in terms of his call for ensuring tolerance at a very volatile time, and considering what has taken place in the last 2 months or so, and what has been taking on for a very, very long time. And this call for tolerance as far as views are concerned, because this is exactly what he referred to, opposing views.
Well, it's obviously up to the Muslim judicial authorities in their own way to respond to his appeal to that Muslim authority. So I don't want to intervene and say what the authority's answer should be. But I think, quite frankly, it's incredibly impertinent, and it's akin in some senses to his impertinence and I dare say smugness in relation to his letter to President Ramaphosa, which I've taken such exception to. And I don't take exception to the religion that he represents, the Judaic religion. I was born into that religion, and I see the religion as not being akin to Zionist Israel. And many rabbis in the past and even the present, and many Jews, practicing Jews, do not agree with the way, unfortunately, Chief Rabbi Goldstein and other rabbis, the chief rabbi in Britain and so on, have come, I would say, to undermine the Judaic religion by its conflation with Zionism. And therefore, we see this result of Warren Goldstein, the chief rabbi, coming to the defense of Zionist Israel every single time. It's part of this man's absolute record. He stands by Israel, a colonial settlement, whichever way you want to see it. He stands by its crimes all the time, apologizing. He's an apologist, as is all the Zionist Federation, the Jewish Board. And in his case, you saw this with the letter to President Ramaphosa. There was not one word, never mind a sentence, about the horrible butchery of innocent civilians within Gaza, on the West Bank, around Al-Aqsa, the attack on the worshippers at Damascus Gate, within Al-Aqsa, the sacred place, the way the Israeli police raided the place, firing their weaponry in their boots and all. But not one word, one tear, in fact, for the 60+ Hamas children, infants, who perished under that criminal bombing of amongst the most crowded areas on this planet, a place where people are imprisoned and there was nowhere to run or hide. And he had the temerity to make such a call to President Ramaphosa without a word in relation to those dreadful deaths and carnage, amongst them 29 women, amongst them some 20 or so very elderly people of the over 250 who perished in the Gaza bombings lasting 11 days. And then the man writes to the Muslim community's judicial authority and he says, we must practice tolerance. No word from him about this one-sided butchery. Yes, there were rockets fired out of Gaza, and we well know that Israel, Netanyahu, and whoever the leadership is, by the way, they will seize on any opportunity, device of their own making to attack Palestinians and say, well, we're attacking Hamas and it's precision bombing, and America, United States, supports them in that, which was a disgusting statement of Biden. And Warren Goldstein supports that, all in defense of Israeli lives. 250 against 12 unfortunate people, yes, who died within Israel itself. So disproportionate, and the man comes to present himself in this way to the Muslim judicial authorities here. I think it's absolutely outrageous.
Yes. Now, also, Mr. Kasrils, in your letter, you've raised many issues, and these issues obviously need to give food for thought to the government in terms of its relationship with Israel. And you've raised a whole host of issues, reminding the president and also reminding the South African government that there needs to be a fundamental shift as far as their thinking of what is taking place in Palestine and Israel goes. Because, again, using South Africa, using our own country as an example in terms of what we did, what we achieved to achieve this democracy. And these are many, many critical issues that our government needs to think about. They need to go to the drawing board, and there needs to be some fundamental policy changes as far as the relationship with Israel goes.
Oh, no, absolutely the case. We do see some shifts, particularly these days. There was an outstanding statement, I would say the best statement, apart from that of our dear past President Nelson Mandela, the icon, when he said that we South Africans can't feel free until the Palestinians are, and that the issue of Palestine is the most moral challenging issue of our times. I noticed that Warren Goldstein never mentions any of this in terms of how South Africans, and he's a South African, I believe. In fact, my parents and his grandparents were very close friends, by the way, and I was a close friend of Warren Goldstein's father back in the day, and I'm talking about the 1940s. But in relation to the government, our director, our foreign minister, Naledi Pandor, has come out with such a strong, firm statement in support of boycott, divestment and sanctions and holding Israel to account. Our president most recently made a statement during May in his weekly newsletter about supporting the just cause of the Palestinians and decrying what Israel was doing. And this, in fact, was the reason why Warren Goldstein then chose himself to give our President Ramaphosa a lecture on being compassionate about both sides, even-handedness, not taking sides in that way, talking about what truth and peace is really about, which is what we hear from Zionist apologists in Israel. The peace that they talk about, the peace of the powerful the occupier, and I'm not just saying the occupier of the West Bank and Gaza, but they dispossessed the Palestinians of the whole of what was the Holy Land, what is the Holy Land, and what was Palestine. And in this respect, we have held out consistently that the South African government, following on from Madiba and pre-Madiba, right through the period of our struggle when the Palestinians were providing us with solidarity, which never came from the Israelis. They supported and were in league with the apartheid governments of the day, helping them to develop all sorts of missiles, including nuclear missiles. And we've decried the fact, earlier period after 94, I took this up with President Mbeki, my dear friend Aziz Pahad was the Deputy of Foreign Affairs. Stop talking about being equal-handed. And every time that we decry the brutal attacks by Israel on civilians, the thousands who have died compared to very, very few on the Israeli side, that you cannot equate oppressor and oppressed. Stop talking about even-handedness. It's not that. Nobody would accept that the struggle between apartheid and the people of South Africa was even-handed. We need to be very firm, and we need to cut off all relations with Israel. And we need to apply boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which is what helped bring about South Africa. And we talked about the Freedom Charter, the land belonging to all the people living in it, and the need for that kind of unitary state. I'm not coming to talk to Palestinians and say to them what they should actually go for. But we've pointed out that with Oslo, to have accepted that the land which they lay claim to as an indigenous people living there for centuries and centuries, going back to ancient times, to bow down to the bullying of Clinton at that time and US administrations, and going for 22%, which today is even more of a mockery, was really giving away too much. And we can see what the Sharons and the Netanyahus and the even worse people coming to the fore in apartheid Israel are actually holding out for the Palestinians, a tiny fragmented Bantustan system, West Bank shrinking all the time, the beleaguered people of Gaza, the people within Israel itself who are worse than second-class citizens, which is why they have been rebelling, and the fact that Israel and its supporters ignore the millions in the refugee camps who need to have the right to return, not the right of Ronnie Kasrils or Warren Goldstein or any Jew to be able to come there, whose great, so many great ancestors have never lived there. And yet we can come there and claim citizenship, whereas refugees who were pushed out from 1948 or 1967, who living whether in Gaza or whether across the borders in Lebanon and Jordan and elsewhere, have no right of return. And we see an absolute nightmare that has befallen the Palestinians, and how the likes of Warren Goldstein support that. So we say to our government, let's take the lead internationally. Let the government get behind BDS. I want to just say finally that my letter that was published to the president, I do accept it. The Sunday Times, they edit certain things out in order to achieve the article's presence, and it's edited. But unfortunately, they left out several paragraphs at the end of my letter, which has gone, I've given it directly to President Ramaphosa and his advisors to look at, but there's at the end of my letter to him, omitted from the Sunday Times, was that very appeal to the government to break off ties with this rogue, racist, apartheid colonial state, to take the lead in the world in applying sanctions, together with our people who must boycott, and our businesses who must boycott Israel, and those who invest there to disinvest, which is how we brought about the end of the power of apartheid in South Africa, and that's the way to go. So we need to get behind this call, all of our people joining forces together to pressurize all governments and to isolate Zionist, racist, apartheid Israel. And this is not being anti-Jewish. There are many Jews all over the world, increasing numbers, including rabbis, including devout Jews. And those do not accept that Israel should have a capital, which they lay claim to, Jerusalem, or a nation state even. I'm talking about Jews who see in the Bible something far different from the likes of Rabbi Goldstein, and their views need to be taken into account as well. And they have a very strong argument in terms of interpreting the Bible, that when Zion is referred to, it's not about having a Jewish capital or even a Jewish state. In protests, you see them standing with Palestinians, with people all over the world, from London and Manchester and New York and Chicago, saying freedom to Palestine. They are prepared to live there with their Palestinian brothers and sisters, and they are against the kind of Zionism evoked by the likes of Netanyahu, criminals, Netanyahu, Sharon and others, and supported by Chief Rabbi Goldstein.
Well, Mr. Kasrils, I would have loved to have a lot more time with you. There's just so much we can discuss, but I'm sure over a period of time, we will definitely engage with you from time to time. But for now, all the best to you, sir. Yes, and obviously calling for peace, definitely. And we wish you all the best. Please take care of yourself. Please be safe. These are difficult times that we are living in with the pandemic as well. And we wish you the best of health.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Salam.
Walaikum salam. Ronnie Kasrils joining us this morning. And with that, we're going to go for a quick break. We come back. We're looking at the European rights body asking Austria to withdraw what is called a controversial Islam map.